There's no way an animal like humans all of a sudden have a population boom. And it's not because the environment all of a sudden got a ton better for the animals. Well, the thing about all of a sudden an easier environment for those animals is that you get, I think, and this is true both genetically and I could say memetically, is that you get a larger variation of things that otherwise wouldn't survive if the environment didn't get better. These ideas, and I think this is mostly true in the space of ideas, where these terrible ideas that would have never survived the pressures of the old world are now allowed to flourish, and the benefits that they can strew to the human animal in easier times are taken as though that they need to get that to more people.
Yeah, no, 100,000% on that front. And I look at it this way, right? So if you look at what the internet has become, the internet is what we would call the manifestation of infinite variance, right? And there's a funny comedian named Sebastian Maniscalco. He has this piece on Netflix where he says, "Aren't you embarrassed?" Right? So he says, 10 years ago, that guy would have been in his mother's basement dressed up like a diaper baby, right? Now they can get together at a Hilton on a Saturday and there's like 20,000 of them, right? So now,
oh my God,
it becomes an amplifying source.
Yes,
right?
That's an amazing way to put it.
Now, let's think about that from a different point of view. So let's take a look at it and say, okay, let's talk about genetic variation. So you live in a tribe with your wife. I live in a tribe with my wife. We're separated far enough that we have a small circle that we can interact with. You have your children, I have mine. Now it becomes a game theory model. The way it becomes a game theory model is I found some fresh water. You come to me and you say, "Hey, so I'm kind of running low on water. My baby's kind of sick. Do you have anything?" Now, for me to survive, I have to lie to you, right? Because if I tell you the truth, what you may end up doing is you may end up killing me at night and taking the water, and now you and your family survived. Maybe you and your oldest son did that. You didn't tell anybody else because you don't want to give them PTSD. You want to keep them morally pure. They don't know where that came from, right?
Yes.
But you took it upon yourself for your lineage to engage in murder and kill me and my tribe off so you can have access to the water, right?
Yep. Sorry, buddy.
This is the way the world works.
Yeah,
now,
exactly.
take that same concept and just start to add the variance to it and just keep multiplying it out generation after generation.
Yes.
7 billion of us, all of a sudden, that's a different animal than a billion of us or 100 million of us or 10 million of us, right? So that infinite variance is going to naturally breed conflict simply because the variance is built into it. And if that variance wasn't built into it, there would be no more businesses because the entrepreneurship couldn't exist without variance, right? You need to be able to see things differently. I need to see things from a point of view of like, that's not how it actually works. Let me show you how it actually can work.
Yeah. Okay. Let me take, this is awesome, Ace. So on my second podcast, I had a guy named Jason Bradley, and Jason, does research into UN and other like NGO policies where he's been looking at like eugenics and population control and policies that are implemented at the international stage that are pushed into nations and so on and so forth. And these things have occurred, just kind of like, hey, we've got so many people, how can we control these variables? But the thing that I realized in my own thinking was like, okay, if I wanted to wage war on my enemies, I would get them thinking this way. Do you think that there are people out there who are trying to do this stuff on purpose from a, like, does that resonate with you at all? Like, or is it just this emergent phenomenon?
Well, the answer is yes, because I mean that is both. Okay. And I'll give you an example of where that can happen. Again, thought experiment time. You're born into a family of,
the Rockefellers.
Exactly. Right? You're a multi-generation billionaire, right? One of you is an infinite deviant case of variance. Your idea is that you're the savior of planet Earth, but you need to crack some eggs to make an omelet, right?
Yeah.
You didn't learn the brutal lesson that if you crack eggs and you didn't make the omelet, all you have is a messy kitchen. So what is it that you can engage in? Now, I'll give you an example of where this kind of conversation starts to lead down the path. Now, I'm going to tell you something that, again, people are going to misconstrue this, but that's okay. This is the way the world is. Think about the idea of a flag, right? You're American. So for you, that flag means something, right? For us, flags have a very specific meaning to them. And if you walk across the border from Afghanistan to Pakistan or from India to Pakistan, a flag is a difference between life or death. Or if you want to talk about the demilitarized zone in South Korea and North Korea, if you're in northern China and you happen to cross over to the North Korean part of the world, you're under that flag's jurisdiction.
Yep.
Right? So why does that matter? Well, let's think about it. What a flag really does is it says, okay, this is a part of the land that has these values. Bannermen in the history of warfare, when they plant the flag, what they're really telling is they're signaling back home that, hey, this area now is under our control.
Yes.
Okay, I want to ask you a simple question. Most people don't put that much thought into flags, but let me ask you a question. Where does this trans flag come from? How come it's everywhere?
Oh yeah. Oh, for
Right?
sure.
You get what I'm saying?
Oh
Nobody
yeah,
really
yeah,
asks.
very much so. I mean, this was an observation that I've seen made on Twitter and like definitely resonated with me.
Right? So it's an encapsulation of a certain set of beliefs. I'm not saying I agree with them or disagree with them. I'm just saying what that flag represents, and it's being flown in corporations and countries all over the world, and it brings with it, it smuggles in through the back door a set of accepted beliefs that are not to be questioned.
Yes.
And it's everywhere. So now you start to think to yourself,
Yes.
okay, if you are a person who was motivated enough to do something of that sort, like you said earlier, maybe coordinating this type of effort could work in that direction, right? It seems to be tearing at the fabric of wherever it lands. There is merit to every idea, even a bad idea. In Canada at St. Mike's Hospital, if you're ever in that area, you start to notice something really interesting, which is there's lots of drugs, right? Lots of drug use, and there's lots of mental health hospitals in that area. And there's this corner of it which the Islamic community tends to have taken over. And there's a bunch of Muslim youth standing around the corner, and they're kind of like roaming gangs in that area, so to speak.
Okay.
Why am I telling you this? Well, I was driving home, and there was this trans person trying to get access to a building. And these Muslim youth were actually harassing. They were trying to instigate a physical confrontation so they can have an excuse to beat this person down. I took it upon myself to open the window and yell at them so that they can come after me, so the person can have a chance to escape. I had to calculate all this. I'm like, okay, green light, okay, I can go. Not much traffic. I'm not going to get, if they start chasing me, gives this person an opportunity to escape. Because again, I don't want violence upon anybody because I know what that's like.
Yeah.
So I took it upon myself to almost put my life at risk just to help this person who was just trying to get into a building and was being harassed to the point where a physical confrontation was inevitable. So I have absolute empathy and compassion for people to be able to experience reality as they see fit, and to help them get to that point where they're minimizing pain for themselves.
Right.
Now, contrast that with the idea that I look around and I see this flag and I see the values that it encapsulates, and those values are mutating every single day. They're not set in stone. That's one of the tells. Yeah. If something is off, it's changing every single time. The reason it's changing every single time is because it hasn't hit the right variation yet. And the way you know that is simply this: the start menu on Windows, always at the bottom left corner, made sense. Nobody needed to change it. The wheel, the brakes, the seat of the driver's seat, once it was established, it got established. You don't need to change a car every year and, now the steering wheel's in the middle, right? Sit in the middle. No, once it's correct, it's in the right spot. You don't have to redo it. The kitchen design, once it's correct, every kitchen is almost exactly the same. The dock on the Apple computer, exactly the same. You don't need to change it 50 times. So if something is constantly changing, that means you're not getting it right.
Right.
So when I see the values that are espoused with this ideology, with that flag, and it's constantly changing, I'm like, they haven't hit the right value yet. They haven't resonated with the mass population enough to be given respect to sustain itself, because they keep changing. And they keep making the circle of what's acceptable smaller and smaller and smaller. And as a consequence, they're actually eroding their base of trust that they could possibly engender in others.
Oh, for sure. I'm gonna go back to the population question. I've no problem, like you said, like people live your life how you want to, but I've also got at the same time to steel man the historical record and why these things have been rejected over time, and why there aren't major religions that include, homosexuality, transgenderism as bedrock protected things. And the conclusion that I came to is because they don't have children, and that any society that encourages these particular ways of being that people have natural inclinations to end up eliminating themselves and undercompeting the people who do, that choose to exclude them. And they end up in the cultures that form around these ways of being, end up having to take the kids from families who tend not to have those beliefs.
Yeah, no, like you said, a self-terminating experimental idea can
It's
only be experimented on in conditions of relative peace, security, and stability.
exactly. And that's why you end up seeing people talk about the fall of the Roman Empire, right? Where at its crest, people were experimenting with these sort of things. The Weimar Republic, when there was this hyperinflation based economic boom, people were experimenting with these things.
Yeah. Experiments, like I said, and I bring it back to Google, right? They have that whole moonshot concept going. Moonshots work when you're making printing money like Google does.
Right.
But now the time when that's open to you is not infinite. You
Yeah.
will eventually run into realities where, now they're having massive layoffs in the tech sector because that free money, easy money is no longer, the low hanging fruits have sort of been picked. And the problem is when you have low hanging fruit, you have as a leader, you have two responsibilities, right? One, obviously get your team to pick as many fruits as possible.
Yeah, get the fruit.
Get the fruit. But if you're a smart leader, you're like, I need somebody to find the next harvest.
Yeah.
I need you to go and I need you to explore an opportunity in a direction where once this thing runs out, we need to have something to eat, right? Or else it's going to turn, zero-sum game, a cannibalism real quick. And we don't want that. Right.
So, this is why you don't eat the cows in India, right?
There's layers to that, right? There's always these concepts that are built into it. And I always tell people, like, and I'll give another example. Let's revert back to the precautionary principle, right? Oh, it's such a great idea. Okay, try it in a country with 1 billion people. Good luck.
Right. Good luck.
You know what I'm saying? It's not going to work. There's 1 billion people. A lot of them are not financially in a position that you can afford to have them sit at home, because you're not going to have. They don't have Uber. They don't have Uber Eats. They don't have that financial capacity to, quote unquote, live as the Western indulgent, self-righteous person who advocates for this perspective on Twitter from their iPhone. Sorry, that's not the real world, right? So ideas that seem good, I've always said, you got to bound them in time and space. What space are you talking about? If you're going to talk about these ideas about, we need more rights for this, or we need more diversity, and I always said to them, okay, why isn't anybody talking about the lack of diversity with Xi Jinping's new cabinet in the Politburo in China? There are no women in that. Forget.
Yeah.
Forget. There's no other Chinese people. It's just there's no women. It's just men. There's 6 men, and they're running the operation. You would think the people who are very gung ho on the whole diversity notion would be all over that, but there's silence. You know why there's silence? Because those movements are backed by violence.
Right.
And these movements are protected by violence. That's why I love somebody like Jocko Willink, right?
Yes.
When you see that guy, you're like, you know what? The reason I get to do what I do is because of guys like that exist.
Exactly.